Yo guys, welcome to The Last Lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. Is there anyone that you've watched in Formula 2, or in GP2 as well, where you've thought, right, cool, this guy has that X factor, I expect them to win a Formula 1 championship, whatever, win races in F1, and it hasn't quite worked out?
I would say that first year, 2015, Stoffel Van Dorn. I think Stoffel, if I was going to have free pick of, I can put the drivers in the seats, I'd put Stoffel back in F1. I think he's better than some of the drivers who are in F1 at the moment.
It was against Alonso.
And the thing is, Alonso...
In that McLaren as well.
He was, first season, he was out qualifying Alonso at, say, Malaysia, right? I think he got 7th on the grid in Malaysia. Yeah. Right. Well, that's a race Alonso's won, been on pole for, performed at. Mm-hmm. And then... Yeah, the downside is when things get away from you in Formula 1, when your shoulders go down, it can be a very, very lonely paddock. And I think, some drivers are really good at fighting against their fate, and they'll fight until the very last race. And if they know they're heading to the exit, they'll just give it everything they have, almost in an act of rebellion against team's decision. I think from Stoffel's point of view, he's a different type of driver. He knew the writing was on the wall, and it affected his performances.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like, have you, you're commentating on these drivers as they're coming through, and I guess it's a challenge because you know of these drivers as human beings and people, and you have conversations with, and that as well as, these names who are, in a helmet that you can't really see. Yeah. And I think we're all guilty as fans of forgetting the humanity of these drivers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does that... Has that been a difficult part of the job? Did you understand that from the outset, or do you think that's taken time to, that the human factor, because you're talking about people? Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. I think that is more of a consideration for me than it is a consideration for you, because when you're, I'm not very sympathetic to most of the footballers. If you're watching a Super Sunday and you're, I'm an Ipswich fan, so Ipswich haven't been involved in a Super Sunday for about 23 years now, so it's not a problem. But if you're watching it as a neutral, you might get stuck in. Jack Grealish loses the ball, you might get stuck into him. Yeah. But from the drivers very, very early on, I think it's a choice that you make very early on, that you have to remember that they've made a huge amount of sacrifice to go there. They've basically deleted their childhood to have this opportunity. And some we know the names of, and we're debating here, and some very, very talented drivers, as you alluded to, who absolutely would have been fast enough to be in a Haas or be in a Williams, don't get the opportunity. And yet they've made all the sacrifice and the money, all the sacrifice with their time, all the sacrifice for the family's time as well. So much of the families get poured into this. Yeah. I think I made a decision fairly early on that I was like, I'm not going to be the paddock police. Yeah. I'm going to be glass half full here. And very rarely with the junior championships, I did Formula 3 for a number of years as well, and Formula 2, you've got to go right over the line to get any sort of criticism, because it costs a lot. They're risking their necks to do it. It's been their family's dream for a really long time. You've got to be sympathetic to that. I think you've got to be sympathetic to that. Now, you could have someone else in this seat go, well, they've put themselves forward and they're trying to get to Formula 1. If they can't take a little bit of criticism on the way up, it's going to get much worse if you get to Formula 1. So you can make an argument either way, but I've always been glass half full with them.
Yeah, I think just giving constructive criticism, someone doesn't perform, I think is absolutely fine. But at the end of the day, I think unlike football, like you said, they're risking a lot. It's a very dangerous sport. Yeah. So, realistically.
You know what? Like, I think part of it is that, and I've seen where, I started making F1 videos in 2019 and, no one was watching, and you're putting your opinion out there as a fan, and you don't really, what you're being shown. And it's like, as my knowledge of the sport has increased over time, and I follow it now, and this is my full-time job, so I'm always like, F1's my life now. Yeah. And people criticize and be like, oh, well, you're not as out there or like bold or like brash with your like thoughts and feelings because you're like pandering. But I don't think it's pandering. I just think it's like, the more you educate yourself on the sport, the more you understand the nuance. Yeah. And the more
it's not like, black and white.
The sacrifices that these drivers make. And then, so when I've got an opinion about a driver, then I'm not going to be as cynical
Yeah.
Because I feel like I get because it is like, it's tough, man. You got, especially drivers who don't come from loads of money. You know, it's really difficult to get the support and the sponsors. Like, you have to be a business person as a teenager to get sponsors on board.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of these. There's a few examples of F2 drivers who do a lot of their own.
Boschong's the best.
Boschong,
He's the best example.
Boschong.
In F2. Every what is it, cent of the euros he raises is his.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the money, doesn't have a manager, not part of a F1 academy. So he's just going door to door, going, "Will you give me money to go racing?"
Yeah.
And he's managed to do it. And he stayed in there long enough to win a race, which was always his aim.
Yeah.
Won it on merit. It's a great day for
I
him.
love his persistence, man.
Yeah.
At least 3 times in a season, I'll hear you go, well, something about Ralph isn't here this weekend because whatever, there were just finances aren't there.
Yeah.
And then he will just pop up 2 rounds later.
Did he have an
again.
injury as well?
He had a massive back injury. Could have ended his career.
Yeah.
Could have ended his career. So, it was a feel-good win at the start.
It's nice seeing that Campos, because I think part of the reason F2s is I don't know if you agree, but I feel like in recent seasons we've seen obviously MP move up the field.
Yeah.
It used to be just kind of Prema, ART, you know, you and I Virtuosi with.
Dams were up there.
Yeah.
Well. Now it just feels like everybody.
It feels like there's a lot more teams that feel like they can be competitive at the front. Would you agree?
I would completely agree. I think there's a really good spread of engineering knowledge because, of course, if you make it a one-make championship, who's going to make the difference? Setup's going to make the difference. So that knowledge is so important. And I think it's really nicely spread from different teams, which is why you're getting the hyper-competitive season that we're enjoying.
It's a one-make series. It feels like it's a one-livery series half the time as well. How difficult actually is it, by the way, just to keep up with the amount of Red Bull drivers that there are in that championship?
Someone said to me after the test, it's going to be hard for you. And someone says it's going to be hard for you every year. Like there was one year where they painted all the cars blue. And I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah. And then
Stop being so negative. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. And then you go to do your prep at the start of the year, and I was like, oh no, this is tricky. This is not what I wanted to see.
I think Enzo's is a bit easier because he's got the bright. He's at Banco Brazil or something.
Yeah.
He's got the bright yellow.
He's got the bright yellow,
and then Hauger's got the
Hauger, Maloney.
Yeah.
Hauger's got the green, but the others all just seem to blend into each other, which isn't kind of ideal.
No, it's not ideal.
But they're all getting support.
I got to say, for the sprint race in Bahrain, I was like, if they're all together, because F2 you can get anything, right? You can get absolutely anything with F2. As we saw with the turn 4 of the feature race, where Boschong went from like 10th to 2nd, right? So you really can get any concoction of race at all. And I was like, if they're all together, I just don't know. If we've got a high angle, I just don't know if I'm thinking, well, what do I do? Can't call them a Red Bull driver because it's not the team names. I was like, well, if they all crash into each other, you're going to have to say something. And then obviously the race starts. Yeah, because
they all drive for different teams, don't they, as well?
But most of them, you've got like two same liveries but different teams, and 2 different liveries but same team.
I was saying to friends about this, and they were like, "Oh, you're actually gonna have to work rather than just
well, no, because
shout about cars."
You remember when it was Joe and I lot in the You and I Virtuosi, and it was the same livery but just one blue, one red, because one was Renault and one was Ferrari.
Yeah,
that was elegant. But now the teams want their whole livery,
which if you're paying for it, I get you want your team colours, but
at least put them in the same team.
It would be terrific if they could, sort of, I mean, Combox please. Why not a yellow Red Bull? Why not a red Red Bull?
Open plea to Red Bull, please.